Places, please. Quiet down. And here we go. And roll camera.
Okay, hello everyone. David here in Free Trading Room, and this session today is on chart setups, and I will walk you through how I set up some of my primary charts. Now, this is going to be perhaps a little different from some of the other sessions and some of the other chart setup sessions, because there's a lot that I do that isn't just simply indicators. So if you follow my work, you know that I do a lot with Elliott wave, with Fibonacci, and of course the Voodoo lines. And the only one of those things that is a simple standalone indicator is gonna be the Voodoo line. So you can see that I've got a lot of stuff on my charts, and the charting platform I use is Motive Wave, and so that will be a little bit different as well. And yeah, Papillon, this is live, so you can ask questions if you want. Of course, it's going to be recorded, so some of you may later hear me saying this and saying it's live when it'll actually be recorded. But here on July 25th, for those of you here with me, it is live. And hello, Alan, as well. And thank you for the confirmation that stuff is good here. Now, of course, the Elliott wave piece, right, is just this idea that when price is going in the direction of trend, we tend to have 5-wave structures. That is these 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5-wave moves, right? And when it's going against the trend, we have 3-wave structures, and that, if we can identify them, tells us that something is going against the trend. And so what I do when I set up these charts, again, I do this in Motive Wave, and I'll come out and look at this on a longer term time frame, right? And this platform gives me a great set of tools for coming in and putting in the Elliott wave structures on my chart. So I just come in and set up, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 on my charts, and it'll go in and put in the wave labels. Right. So when I come in and do that, then I just come in and label the smaller degree waves as well, and it's pretty easy to once you get the handle a handle on it, to come in and put in these wave labels. The platform won't always put them in the right spot, but I can come in and adjust it if I don't like where the platform has chosen to put these labels. And because waves are made of waves, it gives me a good spot to or a good way to look at the trend in different time frames. Now, when I look for support and resistance, I use a number of tools, including Fibonacci analysis, which goes hand in hand with Elliott wave analysis. So often, Elliott wave is going to inform my Fibonacci. So when I come in here and I see a plausible wave 1 and wave 2 and wave 3, I'll look for for where wave 3 is going to have proportionality to wave 1. And for those particular proportions, it's really easy for me to use the platform and look for where, for example, wave 3 might be equal to a wave 1, or where it might be 161.8% or some other proportion. Now, as I said, the platform may not always put these levels exactly where I would, and there are other spots which may look better for several reasons, right? So one of them is going to be that it's closer to 161.8% of wave 1. And then also, as I mentioned, waves are made of waves are made of waves. And so, of course, if we come in and look at this wave 1 to the upside, right in here, it should have its own 5-wave structure. And so, therefore, if we look at it and look at the smaller degree piece of it, right, we can see a very nice 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And beyond that, it by looking at it that way and then using the Fibonacci projections on the way up, it gives me a good spot to look at where I would expect to see resistance. So that's piece number 1. Now, piece number 2 was is the Fibonacci, which I will do in a few different ways, right? When I'm looking at proportions of other waves, then I'm going to come in and the platform will put these fib levels on for me. Of course, I can also draw fibs on my own, where I can come in and just measure, for example, from the 2020 low up to the 2022 high. Oops. And look at where particular fib proportions come in. In this case, we had this low right at the 50% retrace of the move up from the March 2020 low. And then the last thing I'm going to do is look at this with the Voodoo lines. They work really well with both Fibonacci and Elliott wave, and all of the techniques benefit from each other. Here on Motive Wave, it's really easy to add those Voodoo lines in. I simply go to Add Studies and then come in and go down to the Simpler Trading section and add in either the Voodoo lines or the Voodoo lines with stock update. Both will have the same levels for the S&P 500. I'm just going to turn off here on the longer term charts the moguls and the skylines, but I can always add them in and take them off. And when we add them in, you can see that we had the all-time high right up here in the S&P 500 at a Voodoo tree line. These are the second most important of the Voodoo line levels, and so we're going to certainly pay attention when we reach that, but all of the interplay between these levels gives a very clear picture of where we're going, right? So back in early 2021, we broke above the fire line for the first time, at least the 4083 fire line, tested it and held, and that sent us up next to a little snow line. We pull back, we get above, we test from above and hold. That sends it to the next snow line, right? Get a pause there. It needs to feel back for the lower snow line before we break it, test it, and hold. And that sends us up into the tree line. So so these are, right, the basics of what I look for. So option seeker, I've always had this 5 waves up from the 2020 low, right? And gosh, at least for several months, we've viewed this move down as counter trend, right? So so we're considering scenarios where this bounce is also counter trend, and we may need to revisit back down here, but we're not turning down yet. So so we have shown some 5-wave trend moves down in small time frames, but those have all met their objectives. All right. So as far as what the next move is, you can catch up with me on Thursday. Thursdays are the day that I'm in the free trading room to talk about the market outlook and other and other questions on indicators, those sorts of things. Today we're just focusing on the chart setups. So so this is my basic setup with respect to what I'm going to use most often, right? And use in the S&P to guide my outlook for the markets generally. Now, from there are a few other things which I use in conjunction with this. So the first is if I wanted to take a short-term trade, right? So if I viewed, for example, this market in shorter time frames as something which might be, continuing up to above last week's high, and I'm not sure whether it is or whether it isn't. But I'm going to come in and use some short-term tools to help me. And one of the ones that I like to use is both the or is a combination of TrendSpark and the micro Voodoo lines. So what I'll do with those, and let me just bring one of these over, right? Or let's actually get one from scratch here. Let's do that, right? So we'll just build a new chart in the ES futures, and we will then come in and set up this set this up to be a tick chart. And for my short-term trading in the S&P futures, I'm going to use a 700 tick chart. And then let's get at least that piece of it done. And that'll take a minute to load. to get that data on the chart. And then for an indicator, I'm going to bring in the Trend Spark, again, from the Simpler Trading submenu under Studies, and ST Trend Spark. And I just use the default indicator, which isn't coming up right. So let's just go ahead and make a few little adjustments to it. So we need these to be thicker, and we need them to be dotted. So when we do that, we'll get something that looks a little more like the Trend Spark that we're used to. Now, still not perfect. So let's, and I'll show this to you for those of you who use TOS as well, right? And then we're just going to add in the micro Voodoo lines, and I always have on the micro Voodoo lines indicator download page a spreadsheet which will tell you which set of levels I like to use. So this is a great little setup, right? If you're looking to join the upside, you can see we had a pullback that held the micro snow line as support. It turned up, it pulled back, right? And you can see that once it starts printing these cyan dots, suggesting that it's heading up now, you can buy anywhere near these gray dots and trail up beneath those cyan dots. So that would give you a spot to get into the long side as a scalp, right? And usually I'll just take partial profits and trail up the remainder back below those cyan dots. And that's a way to, use a pullback like we had from today's high of the day to get in by seeing that, yes, it's number one, observing support, and number two, starting to turn and giving you invalidation levels to get out if it comes back below. So that's piece number one. And for my short-term trading, what I'll do is I'll just simply look for a combination of these things, right? I'll look for my Elliott wave chart and build a reason to think that we might be turning back up. You can also see that this pullback that we've had from last week's high held support above the 45.18 classic snow line, started to turn up, right? And then from there, right, in the ES futures, right, we got a little pullback in here to join that move. The other thing that that I will look at is I'm still always going to use these Elliott wave charts to form my fundamental view of on the direction of the overall market, right? But when I want to look for individual stocks, so let's say we have a reason to think that we're in a long-term uptrend, which is really the primary time when I'm going to look at individual stocks. Then in that case, what I will come in and do is use these charts, which are probably very similar to what you're used to seeing out of John, right? I just use a weekly, a daily, and then an intraday chart where I'll where I'll come in and change the time frame around, right? Sometimes a 15-minute chart, sometimes a 30, sometimes a 39-minute chart. And with these, I just look at the general direction of the trend, and I look for squeezes as a way to come in and try and join that trend. So let's see if we can't find a little something that's worth looking at on these charts, and I'll show you how I use them. But the first thing to note is that I really want to trade in the overall direction of the market. So give me just a second, and let's take a look at a few things. Let's take a look at Amazon. All right, so Amazon had a squeeze already fired, right? So this is the sort of thing that I'm going to look at. So if I like the market bullishly, and I'm not saying in general I do right now, but you get a squeeze, you have a voodoo line target overhead, and I love and you know I got onto this kick from Henry, right? Incorporating the squeeze with the voodoo lines, just taking squeezes, right? Clearly in a bullish direction, because you know we've got the squeeze, but while we have it, we're just hanging out, right? Testing the 21 exponential moving average with the 8 above the 21, above the 34, above the 55, above the 89. Everything's organized bullishly. We've got the voodoo tree line several percent above, and you just take a trade for this to go in the direction of the trend in the stock, especially if it's aligned with the overall market. And then when it gets to your voodoo line target, you just get out, right? Because you see what happens next. So so in this case, you can also see that that when we have these squeezes, we have a number of these Ready Aim Fire Pro thrust dots on the center line. Those are an indication to look for taking a stock that has been sideways and looking for trend continuation. And this is telling us to look for that trend to potentially be bullish because they're green pro thrust dots, and the squeeze did fire bullishly right into that tree line. So these are going to be my primary setup charts. Now I've got other charts for the internals, for you know, and a few other different setups, but these are my core, right? And this is what I'm primarily going to focus on. Now, let's go ahead and spend just a few minutes talking about how to construct these. Let me start with a different chart. Give me just a second, and I'll show you, for those of you who do stuff on TOS, how I build some of these same charts on TOS. I'll go through it pretty quickly because we're starting to run out of time. But as soon as TOS cooperates and lets me bring up a chart, we will get to that. One second, and we'll have toss going. So look, for an Elliott wave chart, you can do Elliott wave work on toss. It's the way I liken motive wave as a tool to something like toss is that motive wave is in many ways like a and this is still acting really, really slow. It's not letting me change the time frame. So hopefully that will resolve momentarily. But the way I like to think about it is that motive wave is like a word processor for doing Elliott wave. If you're writing a novel, right, a word processor is going to make it a whole lot easier, but it's not doing any of the work for you, right? So doing Elliott wave work in TOS is just like doing it out longhand on pencil and paper. And let's come in here to a weekly chart. And if I was doing Elliott wave work on here, I'd just come down to my drawing tools and bring up the text tool. And you also don't, you don't have all of the character set that you might have on motive wave. In particular, it's going to be hard to draw circles around your wave labels, but usually by convention, if people are just using text on platforms that don't have circled numbers, you use square brackets to represent those circles. And you can come in here and just draw 1 and 2, and then 3 and 4, and then 5 as an example, right? And then if that fifth wave is going to end a larger Roman numeral 1, then we can put that in there and you can move it to the right spot. Or you can. So pretty simple to do that. Now, of course, I want the Voodoo lines on there, and so just the TTM Voodoo lines with stock update. And then because I'm on a weekly chart, I'm going to set some of the inputs on this, and I'm just going to come in and it says hide the skyline on weekly, hide the skyline, hide the snow line on monthly. So the skylines will automatically be hidden. That should be fine, right? And once again, we can see that that all-time high right up by the Voodoo tree line, like we talked about earlier. And again, these are going to be my basic charts. Now, let's switch over to the ES, and I will show you quickly how I set up those scalping charts. Right, the first thing that I'm going to want to do is get rid of these regular Voodoo lines and replace them with the micro Voodoo lines. And as I mentioned on the ES right now, I'm using those alternate levels. And then I just need to come in and for the time frame, because you can see those are crazy close together, set that to tick. 700 tick is already on here. So we'll bring up a 700 tick chart and then we also need to just put on Trend Spark. And as I mentioned before, I use all the defaults with Trend Spark. So that'll pop right up here. And you can see that that same visit to just above the Voodoo snow line, turn back up. And if you trailed up stops under or just above those, or sorry, just below those cyan dots, you're still long. I still think taking half off is probably good, especially as we print a new high of the day. And then just trail up stops on on the remainder. So so you can do the same thing on TOS that you do on Motive Wave or TradeStation or anything else for that matter on all of these charts. And price is continuing to work its way upwards. So I hope you found that useful as a quick intro to how I look at these things. As I mentioned, I'm usually in the free trading room here on Thursdays, 10:30 Central. So if you want to catch up on more of what I'm doing, feel free to check in and let me know. So until I see you next, as always, good trading, and I look forward to seeing y'all again soon.